This program is dedicated to the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes of the Flathead Reservation, to those who came before and left their imprint upon us, to our tribal elders upon whose strength, wisdom, and support we depend, to the Salish and Kootenai culture committees, to whom we look for unfailing guidance. Children, they are truly our greatest resource and our future. And finally, to those yet to come, may our efforts serve to enrich their lives.
Our association with the white man has been about 500 years. And our first association naturally was with Columbus, and the winning of the West or the losing of the West, we look at it as losing the West. Each and every time we accepted these white people with honor, each and every time they left us with dishonor. And we look at the impact of that culture, that European culture on native cultures, not only here but all over the world, and how it destroys, because it's a culture of taking. It's not a culture of sharing.
The ancestral home of the Salish and Kootenai. They traveled these mountains, valleys, rivers, and lakes, hunting, fishing, living, and raising families. There are a few areas that are the same now as they were then. With the homesteaders came social and economic changes that altered the structure of the family, of the hierarchy of clans, and the faces of Indian people. This is the Flathead Indian Reservation in northwest Montana, where Indian people comprise less than 20% of the population. But the people have survived, perhaps not thrived, but held on in places and ways that might not be noticed from the outside. How do people maintain their mental balance, their will to go on in a non-Indian dominated reservation? How do they maintain the balance between tradition, culture, and the society of today?
And they accepted alcohol. And we begin a deterioration and the breakdown of the culture of the people. When we have a strong native culture, it was almost absent in mental health problems, in heart problems, in stomach disorders, and in respiratory problems. Diabetes was unheard of among Indian people. In fact, the first diabetic in Montana was found in 1939. Why? Because we accepted the easy things of this white man's culture, this junk food, this sugar, this pop. And we look at that culture as being convenient, the culture that gave us the gun and the car and the airplane. We thought, my God, this is a powerful culture. We never examined his religion. We never looked and examined his family values. We never looked at things like how he collects and how we share. His whole life is a life of collecting. And to be an Indian, our whole life is a life of sharing. So we get into this confusion. We get the government stepping in and saying, we got to take care of the Indians.
The agencies have to accept the fact that we're dealing with a legitimate people, we're dealing with a legitimate form of government, we're dealing with legitimate needs, we're dealing with a legitimate and justifiable expression of self-determination. I think if agencies could understand that, and I'm not talking just about the federal agencies, I'm talking about public school districts, I'm talking about communities, about city councils, but it is Indian people, and only Indian people, who can decide that, who can design that, and who must come forward with those plans. In the absence of that, agencies will continue to plan for Indian people, and if they continue to plan as they've planned before, then instead of weakening the dependence that we have on those agencies, it's almost as if those agencies become strengthened, because it at least gives the appearance that as long as we have this group of people who are unemployed, who have all these social problems, who have all these low educational levels, who have all these low levels of self-esteem, that we as agencies will continue to thrive, because there in fact is a need for us.
I started feeling ashamed of what I was. I didn't want to be where I was. There was times that I would sit, and think in school, what it would be like if I was white. I could do a lot more. I could be involved in a lot more things that was going on if I was white. And then after school, I'd get home, and then I'd feel better. I'd feel like, there's nothing wrong with what I am. But then, when I was home, I was fine. I felt the need to be who I was. I felt comfortable with who I was. But then when I turn around the next morning and go back to school, I'd feel that same need to want to be part of the white community, to be accepted for who I am. When I was younger, when I was first going to school, there was no problem with that. I got along fine with everybody. There didn't seem to be no division. But as I got older, the kids got older, whether they learned or whether they were taught from home or what, but the division started being more precise, more clear, that I was Indian and they were white.
Find natural caretakers, natural healers, look and doing a lot of talking about who it was in communities that people went to when they had problems, and looking at the health of communities, looking at the natural networks that exist in communities on the reservation. On our particular reservation, we have several communities, so that meant looking at a number of areas where people had common interests and common cultural beliefs.
He says they have Agnes Vandenberg's camp, and that's where everyone comes there for help. She sits and she talks to the people how to raise their children, to discipline them, to talk to them into something good and something bad, not to hold and not to take. And he says he knows here we don't have that. He says he come here for that reason, that he thinks he should set up one for us Kootenays here too also. That they could come to us and ask us for help like they do Agnes Vandenberg over there. That was one thing I remember, that's what Kevin had said when he was here with us. And he wanted to know if we want it. And we says, well, if they want us to help, we are willing to help, we can, That was one of them, that he came here for that reason. And of course, as we always say, we don't know too much, because what we do know, we picked it up from our grandparents, and then what we know is how we brought up our own children, in an Indian way. And some works and some don't, and It's like Agnes Vandenberg's camp there, she's got everything. You want to learn how to dry meat, you go, you know. You want to know how to tan hides, you go there. Or you want some fairy tales, and you do get it from her. And prayers, you get it from everything that she's got over there. How to make fried bread, that's the main thing.
Just about 10 years ago. And just then I understand about that kind of work. There was a lot of them came up and start what we would want them to do. But later I see people that just like they really want to learn what we was teaching them. But before that, I used to go to these powwows. There was just two people that was dancing, had their outfits. But 2 years after we start teaching, I seen a lot of people has outfits, from children to everybody. Even men, they had their outfits made. I think we're doing really good about that kind of stuff, because they had to furnish the beach and everything. So we didn't have to wrestle our own. So everybody learned. They're always wishing. That was what day we used to start. Wednesday? Every Wednesday ask me what day. It's Wednesday. They always wanted every day. I says, can't do it.
Thinking about what mental health is, I did some reading, and one guy described mental health as a person's adjustment to their culture, and failing to adjust to the culture was abnormal. And I thought about that in context to Indian people, how difficult that would be in some instances to do, because Indians necessarily have to adjust to not only their culture, but they also have to adjust to the major culture. And so they have to know what's expected of them in the Indian culture, and they need to know what's expected of them in the major culture. Also, what the values of each of those cultures are, and sometimes they're different, necessarily different. And I think that when there's a conflict between those two cultures, when there's a conflict between the values and the expectations, that's when mental health suffers for the Indian people. And I think, I'll just speak personally, that I think that's when I have the most difficulty, is being straight and being square on where I am, which group of people I'm with, how to act in this group of people and how to act in another group of people.
Our dad didn't want us to be Indians. That was when it was where you had to be white. You weren't supposed to talk or dress like that and cut our hair off. So we just turned white, and we didn't fit in because we were dark. We didn't eat the same things, and I don't know, didn't dress the same. We didn't have the money. I know I'm Indian because I love the nature and everything. I have to get back to it, learn how to do it all over. That's when I'm comfortable, is when I'm Indian. I can't be white anymore, I don't know how.
The exciting thing is that now there are other ways to deal with it, and that we as a tribe are making the turn. We're saying, no, you don't have to medicate that pain anymore. We're going to face it, and we're going to heal it, and we'll move forward and be stronger because of it. And that's exciting. That's why you take the chances to do the other work that we have to do.
You know, the issues of allegiance, the issues of racism, the issues of identity, the issues of dependence versus independence. You know, it's a fact that the darker you are, the more you have to negotiate to get through life. And Indian people, you know, need to, and I'm sure they've heard this many times, need to embrace that which they are and not try to be somebody that they're not. You know, we have, as Indian people, embraced certain philosophies, and some of those philosophies, I think, are very attributable to the real serious situation that exists on reservation in terms of people's personal capacity to deal with the issues in front of them.
My whole philosophy is, in administering this program now, is that I don't develop programs for chronic alcoholics. I develop programs for people that are suffering the pain from the disease. And some of us are more chronic than others, but all of us are looking at the disease and all of us have been affected.
I think the person who has kind of a holistic outlook on health, mental health, health in general, will have an easier time understanding, you know, the cultural kinds of things on the reservations. A clinician who has specialized, you know, in one particular area or has an expertise, you know, and that kind of thing may have more difficulty understanding the kind of global view I think that Indian people have of mental health. You know, it's not something isolated from your life. You know, it's all integrated, and so I think that people with that kind of view of you know, that mental health is not unrelated to physical health or whatever, is going to have an easier time. Each reservation has its own unique culture, you know, and it varies from place to place, and yet there are great consistencies too. You know, there are certain things, I think, beliefs and lifestyles that kind of transcend, you know, each individual cultural part. So.
And what no one was looking at was the mental health of people. Slowly the alcohol began to take its effects, and even more slowly the food began to take its effects. The commodity program in its own way is as destructive as a rifle against Indians. We come from a mental and physical healthy group of people. And now we're approaching 90% overweight. Our major health problems is substance abuse, and when I say substance, I mean drugs, alcohol, and food, anything that we take in. We're excessive in that. You see mothers putting pop in the bottles of their children. Bottle mouth is a problem in our health. Diabetes is a problem, all because of, I guess you could say, people not mentally healthy. People who look in the mirror and see an ugly person looking back at them. So when we examine the mental health of people, and we want to cure the mental health of people, then we have to look back, and we have to go back those 500 years and begin to collect and evaluate all the information that we have. And in 1988, we have to say to the people, some of the best things that we had were old things. Respect for elders. Do we respect our elders today? No. Why? Because a lot of our elders haven't earned the respect. Because they were the most captured group that we had. They were the ones that were brought up talking Indian, put into the boarding schools, married outside of the tribe, either other tribes or whites. They were taught that everything that Indian was bad and everything that white was good. And we wonder why we have a mental health problem today. And how do we attack that? We go back in history, we find those things that are good, and we begin to indoctrinate them into the system like we're doing up in Agnes's camp, like the mental health is doing. We're taking a look at that whole Indian. And we're trying to give that Indian something that says, I can look in the mirror and see a good-looking person looking back at me.
You see a lot of Indian people neglecting their children, neglecting their culture, and neglecting their spirituality in many ways. And we almost swung over to the what we'd call the enjoyments of life, the prosperities of America. And we made a hard swing that way, and we're trying to make a swing back to the importance of culture, the importance of spirituality, and arguments of which ways to do it better, which ways the real traditional way, which ways the authentic way. And those, I think, we're doing it with a sort of a closed eye, because we can never go back to the old way, but we can reach back to the old way and look at it and take the positive from there and bring it up and look at the modern way here and take the positive ways from there and integrate it together to, as I see it, to survive as a Indian people.
And then he might in turn go just a little bit farther back. But you go back far enough back that you can get a full understanding of what you are seeking for. I'd say the elders are there's just no way to say that anybody but the elders could tell you that. You can go back in history books and you would never get a clear picture of what you're looking for. You could go back in the books that have been written about this tribe, and you would miss a lot because it doesn't tell in full. It doesn't make a clear picture of what life was like back there. Today we got the same thing going on. I need to know some things sometime. Well, the best source of my information today is Agnes Vandenberg. I go to her because she goes back a few years. And the cultural things, I can go to her or Agnes Kenmill. And then before Agnes, I'd go to Mary Andrews. And she'd sit there and explain things to me. She'd take the time to do it. I visited her real often because she was like a watering place to me. When I traveled reservation every day. And whenever I get thirsty in my spirit, in my soul, I'd stop in her place and she'd tell me things that would kind of fill me and revive me.
I've worked here for a long time and I went through a lot of different stages and processes and struggles with that and trying to figure out what is it that I'm doing. And I think something that we all share, moments and times where I feel real lost about what is it that I'm doing here and how is it that I can help anyone. I think something that happens in our program that's helpful to me is that we do have this real solid kind of clinically based program with everything that goes along with that. But what seemed to that I became aware of is that solid clinical kind of program is only going to work if there's something there to hang all of that onto.
One needs to listen very carefully for the medicine aspects and the belief system that go with that. And certainly, I can think of a couple of people I've seen over the time who have a tough time balancing Christianity versus native beliefs, Christianity versus medicine, just as much as people who really feel torn between saying, if I do this, then I have joined the white man's world.
And I feel like that a lot of people have lost their way. They don't know where they're at with this world. They don't have nothing traditional. They don't have, like a lot of them are supposed to be Catholics. They don't know how to be Catholics. They don't know how to be traditional. They don't know how to be anything. So they're nothing. I mean, you know, they have nothing to hang on to, no roots. And so they're just out there existing from day to day and doing whatever they think they want to do. There's no discipline, there's nothing.
And that it seems like what we discovered here is that foundation, that place where that can be attached to is with people like Agnes, the things that she teaches us. And I know in a lot of reports and different things that I've written, I always refer to her as our mentor. And people have questioned me about that and have said, you know, what do you mean that she's your mentor? And I said, you look up the word mentor in the dictionary, and that's exactly what I mean, that she is our guide. She is the person who in many different ways and by doing many different things gives us ideas about what directions we need to go into. And I think that's expanded over the years, that there are many people who are a mentor in this program now that teach us a lot of different things, that show us a lot of different ways.
Teaching in Native American cultures may, at times, seem to occur by vague, indirect, and subtle means. It may take the form of stories, illustrations, examples, and songs. When working with elders, it is important to remember that brief contact may be unsatisfactory. In some instances, the elder may wish to consider and contemplate the issues being addressed before offering response.
In the schooling that I've had, part of the frustrations I've had sometimes in the healthcare field is the fragmentation of people, where in the medical field people are brought down in terms of parts or illnesses, and I think that applies to the mental health program in what Sherry was talking about, in that people should be viewed in a holistic manner, not only as being mentally healthy, emotionally healthy, physically healthy, but those all tie together. And I think that's what the old ones knew. And this is something I think that our program works for. And the team building, that is a part of that. Because if you have a balance in your life, then you're healthy everywhere. And I think that's something that we always remember.
So I guess we have a big job ahead of us. And by achieving success in mental health, we take the whole person, as they say in the field, holistic. I don't like that term, but as we say in the field, holistic. The whole person. And We don't just cure his aches and his pains, we cure his mental attitude. We get into his head if we can. And we do it in a number of ways. We do it by taking kids out on the river and letting them float the river, and showing kids that there are ways to recreate without drinking and drugs, taking them up in the mountains. We do it with the elders' talking circles, giving the elders a rightful place in our society, having input where they were left out for so long.
But that's the goal that we seek as leaders, to be where when you walk into a place of a gathering, that you are readily and easily recognized because of who you are. Not to stand above anybody, not to raise yourself up there and say, well, hey, I'm way higher than you are. Now you look at me. No. But to be in that place where you can gain respect of your people, yet be on the same level as your people.
We have been fortunate that the psychologists we've had here on the reservation haven't been people who place themselves on a pedestal. I think when people think about psychologists and professionals, they feel some sort of intimidation in something that I take great pleasure in sometimes is when we're having group or something and someone asks for feedback from maybe a psychologist, and Agnes will lean over and she'll say, that's what the old ones would have said. So a lot of times I think when you're working in this field, a lot of the things that you practice and do have really a lot to do with common sense.
I know that I've had sometimes an expectation that I'm this incredibly wise person and I'm going to have all these answers for people, and I'm a human being going through life just like every other human being. I've had lots and lots of years of school. But I know I was talking with one client about one of the things that I am able to do is to go through this period of time in their life with them. And I can walk with them through this. And it's frightening and terrifying sometimes for them, but I will be there for them. And in many respects, that's not any different than a very, very close friend or a spouse or someone else.
For me, like each day of recovery is like a brand new day that's given to me. And being able to wake up and hear the birds, and see the sun, and maybe watch that moon go away. That's a brand new life today. And like you, I think if I woke up and couldn't hear the birds or couldn't see the sun, I guess it wouldn't seem like there was a whole lot to live for or to even stay straight for that day. It helps me each morning to do that. It's a learned behavior for some of us who've been using our whole lives or who don't have elders around us or have no one that could teach us that. It's learned. We have to go out and find it and learn it all over again. And it's sometimes it's really hard. And that's why places like your camp really help.
If Coyote howls up east, that means it's going to get cold. Then if it's behind you, it's going to change the weather. So that's the way they had. They didn't need no radio, nothing to know what's coming. And then they know in the fall, like squirrel, if they pack their food up on the tree so high, we're going to have a lot of snow. Then if they don't pick that mushroom or any kind of food for them, there won't be no snow. Then if they pick it up and take it way up, that's where we're going to get it. that's when the old people says, get ready for a wood. Gonna be a lot of snow. And then them snowberries too. If they ripe, they're really heavy. You see them sometimes in their big bush, they're not too tall. They're just white. That means you're gonna have a lot of snow. I tell that to Jim. Jim is really learning pretty good. So, about them chickadees too, and chipmunk, pine squirrel.
If I walked into your office tomorrow morning and said, I had the most amazing conversation this morning with a porcupine on my way over to pick up the paper, you justifiably would look at me a bit askance. I can think of several many people who have come in and said, I don't know how you feel about this, but, and talked to the magpie, or I've talked to the porcupine, or I've talked to the squirrel, the chipmunk, or what. You say, well, you got to plug that into the system. Say that's not all as crazy as it sounds.
Well, I think, as I recall in the beginning, one of the things that was a real key to beginning this blending was that we sat down and articulated a philosophy and a vision. So I would really recommend that being the first step, because as we would go, we would have to stop ourselves now and then and say, let's go back to the bottom line of what we really believe is a mental health program. Sometimes we would be pulled away from that philosophy because it is not easily supported by what the rest of the healthcare system is doing. And sometimes we would feel guilty because we were having too much fun. And and we're supposed to be working hard to help people's health in a mental area, emotional area be bettered, and so having fun by tuning into the healthy parts of one's culture and identity and community was something that we had to kind of sort through and finally give ourselves permission that it's okay, that we were helping ourselves as well as helping individuals and families. But that philosophy and a belief system, having it written down and having it affirmed every few weeks seemed to be really important in the beginning.
I think that it changed the way that we provided services, in that we began to focus more on the beauty and the strength of the culture and of family systems rather than treating. Well, we treated the problems, but we focused on the assessment of beauty and strength. And I think that gave clients more permission to become involved in the program.
We have a letter that came from juvenile probation on a CUB, he's 18-year-old male.
During early development of the mental health team concept, the Tribe and Indian Health Service established that because individuals and families on the reservation tended to have multiple problems, and that our focus was to be preventative and family-orientated, that we would have to adopt a multidisciplinary approach for intervention. From this belief, weekly mental health team staffing was designed, the purpose being to more effectively develop, coordinate, and implement treatment planning. Interdisciplinary staffing has many obvious advantages. However, it is important to be aware that it is a difficult task, requiring frequent and regular monitoring for major issues or areas of disagreement. Additionally, it is important that the team enter staffing with an understanding, appreciation, and respect for each member's areas of expertise, strengths, weaknesses, and areas of interest. This requires a structured mechanism to achieve.
She was seeing Jackie Monique, and Jackie called me about her.
Yeah.
And after the interview, we then got this young man in and did a statement on him, of which he denied any of the allegations. We also had, this girl had 2 other cousins who came in and disclosed and also gave corroborative evidence that they had also been approached by this boy at different times to be involved in different sexual acts.
If services aren't coordinated, some clients will use one agency against the other, or the plans that come out are at opposite ends, confusing the client. One program's trying to do something with the patient, another is doing something else. And it may sound far-fetched, but that does happen. It has happened, and patients get very confused by that. So I think the integration of the services has a lot of benefits. I think it's a learning process. Everyone from the agency involved, learns in the staffing. I think that's one of the great values of sitting down, staffing a case, and hearing other people's views. Certain people have certain information that if you're planning in some kind of isolation, you don't know anything about. You don't know all the dynamics of the situation. So in my view, I think you create a better product, if you want to call the mental health service, the end product, a product. It's something that just, in my mind, has to be done.
One of the things that I think that has really helped the alcohol program in this journey to a community-based program was the assistance we got from the mental health team. And being a part of the mental health team, I think there is the continual battle between alcohol programs and mental health programs over, do you deal with the mental health issue first or do you deal with the chemical dependency issue? And it's really easy for the other program to say you deal with the other one first when they don't want to work with that client, or no, you deal with this issue first when they want the client. But when you have to get together and staff the case together, and you have to look at guidelines, and you have to be able to come to a common ground, then it works. Then, that's the sharing of expertise works. When mental health programs respect chemical dependency counselors for the work and their expertise in their field, then I think chemical dependency programs will respect mental health workers for their expertise. But it's a two-way street, and you have to talk about it. You cannot think it's going to happen without clear communications over a long period of time. And those discussions are going to be heated, they're going to be emotional, they're going to be very territorial at times. But if you do that and you do it continually over a long period of time, everybody benefits. But the client benefits the most, because we're not saying we're going to fix this problem and then you're going to go fix this problem. That's not realistic. It's one person, and they need to come to recovery together as one person, not separate programs working at different elements of the same person.
In introducing these new ideas was the shift from looking at the client, or the individual as the client, the patient, to looking at the family, the community, the tribe, different agencies, that we're all clients in some to need to attend to some area of growth at one level or another. And so in lots of ways, what had helped us in working out relationships with other agencies was to realize that we're all siblings in a family.
All the people, whether you're, whatever tribes you're from, whatever nation you're from, even white people, each person has their own contribution to make, their own way of helping to make better lives for themselves, for their families, and for all people. Whether you might be a mother raising your children, you're teaching your children, you're contributing to your children, who in turn will contribute to their children and other people, or a father, or a medicine person,
or a prayer person who builds homes, a person who we all have our own gift to give. We are all a gift to each other.
This reservation right here, there's a lot of differences of opinion because there's not they cannot fully understand one another. The Indian person does not fully understand the white man, and the white man does not fully understand the Indian man. And so there's always that little bit of friction there because of lack of understanding, lack of communication. Some people are shouting and they're raising their hands and say, let's sit down and talk. But when they sit down and talk, what are they going to say so they can fully understand one another? Do you understand what I mean? This is why I say that this language has got a command. The same as Chinese or whatever. They got full command of it, their language. When they say something, it has a meaning. And when I say something in Indian, it has a meaning. But if I try to translate that word to another language, even to say the Chinese, it would lose some of its meaning. It would lose some of its power. A tree standing up is a tree. When it falls down and is laying on the ground, it's not a tree, it's a log. So you look at your language and you say, well, it's an Indian language, it's Flathead. Some say it's Salish, I say it's Flathead. And if we change it to English, then it's not Flathead no more. It's English. Or if we try to translate word for word, all we got is just a rough translation. We've lost the power of that word. Grass, when it's standing up, it's grass. Beautiful. Blown in the breeze. But when a mower comes by and cuts it down, then what is it? It's hay. What do you do with hay? You feed it to the cows. And that's just kind of like the way this culture is. When it's been cut down, when it's been diluted to where it's lost its power, then it's no longer the culture that we had 2 or 3 generations ago. Because it's been cut back, it's been diluted, it's been intermingled with other things, then we lose it.
My grandmother would spend 2 or 3 days in Arlie, 2 or 3 days in Ronan. You know, she'd travel around visiting. And then these same people that she visited would come to our house for 2 or 3 days to visit. And there was always a family atmosphere. Now that you don't have that. Yeah, it's all gone. You can have a person that you know living right next door, but you see, yet you never go visit. You don't see them, you don't go take the time to visit. You meet them on the street somewhere, and then you talk to him, but yet he lives right next door and you don't go see him.
Losses of language and traditions resulted from the attempted acculturation and assimilation of Native American populations into major society. Those of us fortunate enough to have prolonged contact with grandparents and great-grandparents, caregivers who still remembered and practiced the native languages, traditions, and values, can see these losses clearly. We experience the affection, nurturance, and guidance expressed comfortably and naturally by these caregivers, whereas when English is used as the primary language, expressions of love and caring are not as effective, since the language of intimacy is impaired or lost.
And no love and affection. People don't let their kids know, I care about you, no matter what. I don't care if you're in trouble. I still love you, and I'll stand behind you. You know, that's another thing I never see a lot of people do. They don't give their kids the affection that they need. Even if you said, you know, I love you once in a while, or even put your arm around a kid once in a while. You know, let them know that you care. It doesn't have to be every day, just once in a while, especially when they're in trouble or something, and you say, well, I'm here for you, you know, no matter what. Don't disown that kid and walk away, oh, that's not my kid because he did this or she did this. You don't walk away from your kids if they're in trouble, you help them.
And even my daughter was a married woman, she still had a spanking from this mother. That's the way old timers are. Old Indians, really.
I just completed a budget process. By the whole tribe department. And guess what they picked for #1 priority? Not people. Natural resources was first. They didn't pick people first. They picked natural resources. And all of those people are running around, I would guess, in a facade of sanity, because I certainly think that's a wrong choice. I think that we have to put emphasis on the people. And if you look at Indian history, then the emphasis became on the children. The children are the future of this country, this world. Not just in Indian society, but all over. But the history tells us where to start. And so we've been in the mental health business for a number of years, and I don't feel until just recently have we accomplished anything. I think the things that we're doing today probably can't be tabulated or will never be tabulated. 20, 30 years from now, when we don't have the problem that we have today. I think through the mental health program, through Agnes's, I think through just a spread that Indian religion, history, culture is making some rapid leaps. And I think we're leading the way. But to prove it, I don't know. I think that we will look at it and say, 30 years from now, we'll say, you know, there used to be a mental health department here at Flathead. There's not any anymore.
The staff of the mental health program wish to acknowledge Dr. Scott Nelson, Myra DeBryan, and Margene Tower of Indian Health Service for making this video possible.
It is important that viewers watch us with the understanding that the process we present is not a simple one.
During the making of this video, we became painfully and joyfully aware that the development of this mental health project has been a process, not always easy, sometimes met with resistance from many forces.
If you should choose to undertake a similar journey, be prepared for difficult times, but also many rewards as the process can work.
Good head on her shoulders, and Carol thinks, and she just does an excellent job. And Bart, I'm here today because we're going to honor some very special people, very special to me, and I know to a lot of you folks. This actually was written up in Seminole, Sam. I've been a social cases company I think I'm only going to get one shot out of this flash, so I'm going to count to 3 and everybody smile.